Hi all, it is a true pleasure to greet you. Thank you so much for joining us and welcome to this event. Baker McKenzie is co-hosting together with five, the Legal 500 on some of the most current topics that are happening in the region. We will be discussing issues on remote working, hybrid work systems, mental health issues arising because of remote working, and the implications around this matter. My name is Tatiana Garces, and I will be your moderator. I am a partner and lead the employment and compensation practice at Baker McKenzie's office in Bogota, Colombia. I am delighted to be joined by a panel of professional and expert women in their field who will be our speakers today. We have with us Leticia Ribeiro, partner of Trench Rosie Watanabe in Brazil. With more than 20 years of experience, she is the leader of the employment and compensation practice in Brazil and chair of the area in the Latin America region. With us is also Javiera Medina, partner at Baker McKenzie's Mexico City office. She has over 24 years of experience and focuses her practice on labor and employment matters. Furthermore, we have with us very special guest speakers from the healthcare and the automotive industries. Catalina Robledo is the legal manager and general counsel at Distribuidora Nissan, which is part of the Verdi Group. She is a corporate lawyer with an LLM and has wide experience as general counsel in board of directors and shareholders meetings and all matters related with corporate governance. Last but definitely not least, we have Gabriela Rodriguez, who oversees legal operations for Stryker Corporations Mexico and in North Latin American divisions. As counsel, she advises on compliance matters in direct channel contracting and oversight and cross-border acquisitions. So we have a very nice and interesting panel of women today. Navigating the COVID-19 pandemic and its aftermath is one of the biggest business challenges of our time. It is also an extraordinary opportunity to share our organizations for the future, to keep operations going while minimizing the risk to employees. Most companies have adopted new ways of working that range from remote to hybrid working. The health and safety of the workforce is one of the management priorities as it starts bringing operations back to a semblance of normality. From a business perspective, safeguarding employees' well-being is paramount because no plan to resume normal operations can succeed without them. We all know that. Returning to the workplace could mean recalling furloughed employees, transitioning away from mandatory remote work, or ramping back up toward full productivity, regardless of where work is being performed. Management acknowledges that while all their employees have experienced these crises, they haven't all experienced it in the same way. Working from home has taken a toll on our mental health that a lot of people simply weren't prepared for. Now we realize that burnout is a real medical condition that can easily affect people that work from home. So mental well-being has become more of a priority. So going back to the office may come with benefits like increased productivity, less loneliness, and firmer boundaries between work and home life. But for those staying in remote or hybrid arrangement, it is important to look out for their well-being and seek ways to improve the remote working experience. For example, establishing new channels of communication and considering individual needs. These can help them stay productive and healthy to ultimately boost the business. We have definitely a new understanding of what is possible, and this has to be leveraged. Just as importantly, companies need to adhere to new dynamic health and labor laws and regulations, increasing the complexity of the task. And here, I would pause to ask Javiera, in connection with our first topic, remote work, if there are new regulations in this area from the government and from the different governments, and if are these regulations applicable only during pandemic? The floor is yours, Javiera.
Thank you, Tatiana. Thank you, everyone, for listening to us. And well, yes, I believe that this is a very important topic for all employers in all of our countries, because as you said, we cannot deny that this pandemic and all the measures that the governments have taken to control it, such as the lockdown and the social distancing, have a significant impact on the mental health of employees. And in this regard, we have seen significant changes in our laws. For example, in Mexico, it's mandatory now for employers to pay to the employees the cost of internet and proportional electricity. This has been very new. It was just enacted in January of this year, and the main purpose is to help employees with those related costs because they are working from home and they have to spend more money in this regard. So yes, we definitely are seeing changes in our laws to help employees to solve those costs related to working from home.
Thank you, Javiera. And Leticia, I would like you to comment a little bit. Are there expense reimbursement requirements provided by law within the different countries of our Latam region? If there are no requirements, any best practices that you have been able to identify during this time?
Thank you, Tatiana, and hello, everyone. Well, as a general rule, employers in our region must provide the necessary equipment and tools for the employees to carry out the work, even if it's remotely. And similarly, business expenses should be borne by the employers. But the details in terms of which specific expenses should be reimbursed in remote work, including work from home, as well as the method of calculation varies a lot in different jurisdictions in Latin America. And for this reason, and to keep consistency within the region, to the most extent possible, it is generally advisable to implement teleworking policies, providing in further detail the employer's obligations with respect to working tools and the reimbursement requirements. Several countries are actually now trying to catch up with the new reality that you described post-pandemic and discipline the matter in more detail. In Peru, for instance, it is expected that a new teleworking law will be passed soon, covering expense reimbursement as well. There has also been discussions in Brazil, where I'm based, on the same matter, as currently our labor code provides general obligations on the matter. In Argentina, employers must bear the cost of installing, maintaining, and repairing all working equipment and tools, as well as any additional costs the employee incurs while working from home. But curiously, in Argentina, the entry in force of the remote working laws and regulations are actually temporarily suspended while COVID-19 related restrictions are in place. In Mexico, as Javiera just mentioned, the law actually lists what home office expenses should be reimbursed. In Colombia, now I'm going to your territory, I know the national government issued statutes entitling certain employees to a connectivity allowance. And when the Colombian government removes the current emergency measures, if employees continue to work remotely 2 or more days a week, then the parties will also have to agree on the reimbursement of home-based work expenses, such as telephone bills, internet, stationery supplies, and the like. Just on a final note from my side, it is always very important to properly structure the reimbursement of expenses to mitigate the risks of this being subject to payroll charges. If payment is made in the form of a cash allowance, regardless of the expenses actually incurred, in certain jurisdictions, it can have a compensation nature. And so for this reason, trigger payroll taxes. On the other hand, in case the reimbursement of specific expenses is properly agreed in writing, then they may have an indemnity nature and avoid triggering payroll taxes. Back to you, Tatiana.
Thank you, Leticia. And with this, I would like to ask Catalina from our automotive industry, what trends are you seeing in this space and in particular in your industry and company? Catalina, the floor is yours.
Hello to everybody. Very nice to be here with all of you. So, well, there's no doubt that COVID-19 has caused an unprecedented reliance on remote work. We didn't have any policy about this form of work before the pandemic. And the majority of automotive companies didn't have one either. So I think we have seen this time as an opportunity to review the situation and establish a policy to implement remote work. And this will stay as part of the way to work from now on. We have to bear in mind as well that many automotive companies have taken measures related to cost reduction. And one of them is to have employee flexibility as a driver for policy changes. Therefore, I consider that promoting remote work policies could be an interesting approach as a method of attracting and retaining talent, as remote work is known to have a positive impact on work culture and productivity. However, this shift to working from home has had many challenges because having an effective remote work requires overcoming barriers related to communication, team collaboration, access to information and data, for example. And addressing these issues means finding solutions for how to collect and share information and take technological measures to protect it, align priorities for the business and for the team, retain regular contact and communication with the team members and among them, communicate which are the rules and implications to work from home, effectively track the outcomes of your team, and these are just some examples of all the implications we have to address now that we know that remote work has arrived to stay. But in order to confront all these challenges, I would like to highlight what I consider one of the most significant improvements um, we have made to the way the business works in the automotive sector. So we are a retail company and the client satisfaction is very important. Everything that business do must come back to the customers. And we have understood how to the circumstances that have generated remote working demands are also impacting customer habits. And that means online shopping. Before the pandemic, it was very rare to consider buying a car online. But now for consumers, online car shopping is simply more convenient than making multiple trips to view cars in person at dealerships. So of course, the dealership still plays a critical role in the customer journey, as the majority of people will still want to test drive at some point before they buy. However, moving towards a more robust and user-friendly online presence and facilitating easier online sales opens up a dealership to new opportunities. And that is what we have done, developing a web page that allows to clients going through the buying process completely online. And this outcome was very satisfying for the sales force and for all the team that developed this important sales tool. So for our company, this was one of the main changes in the business model from presentiality to virtuality.
Thank you, Catalina. Definitely very disruptive. I can't imagine buying a car online without touching it
It's happening.
and sitting there.
And it's
So,
increasing. Every day is
yeah.
increasing.
Yes. So, moving a little bit, Gabriela, what would you say which are the advantages and challenges on these regard from a general counsel's perspective as yours?
Thank you, Tatiana. So in terms of challenges, one of the biggest ones that we're dealing with, especially now, is the subject that Leticia discussed, which is the reimbursements issue. As she said, like the regulations vary from country to country, and they're still changing. So it's kind of unclear still, how they apply, especially because, a lot of companies, including Stryker, it's not like a hard reopening of the office. There's a lot of, okay, well, as vaccinations go up, some people can come up, but some with a hybrid schedule. And we're existing in this limbo situation where it's not really clear exactly, who is a remote employee at this point, who is not, whether that situation will change in a month, especially as new information comes out on the virus. I mean, I can say from my own experience, I'm based in Florida, and the office that I work in has been reopened, and then now I've been shut out from it again as the Delta variant grows. So it's unclear as to even my own status, like, am I a remote worker? Am I a part-time? And that is a challenge, figuring out how these regulations apply. This is something where we rely a lot on our external counsel to give us guidance, and very specific guidance to our own company. Because one of the challenges for a multinational is, okay, one country might have very stringent requirements that we need to comply with. We also can't have a huge discrepancy on what we offer employees in Mexico versus Colombia versus Brazil, even if those regulations are different. So that's one of the things that we're navigating, is finding a way to implement these regulations, but also in a way that is equitable for all our employees across the region. In terms of other issues, we are very lucky that Stryker is a very tech forward company, in the sense that before the pandemic, we had a lot of really good technology infrastructure, good video capabilities, very secure technology, and all our employees, at least in my experience, were very well versed in these technologies. So, the learning curve was not very high for us when we had to switch to, basically a hybrid model. But my understanding from just some of my peers at other companies or law firms was that this wasn't the case. And I'm personally a millennial, so I'm what they call a digital native. I understand that, in a lot of workplaces, there's some people who for a long time didn't really have to deal with a lot of technology, didn't have to deal with video chat or making PDFs or things like that. And I think that with the pandemic, that has changed, and a lot of people that were resistant to adopt technology have now picked up on that. So I think that that's been a really good advantage for a lot of companies. And I think that a big takeaway is that workplaces really need to think about how they adopt these technologies and in the future, and make sure that all their employees are well versed, so that they avoid the issue of a catastrophe coming and not knowing what to do.
Thank you, Gabriela. And this brings me to something that I believe is quite important. And maybe to close this topic, I would like to ask you if you envision we employers, industry will need a special or particular kind of employee within these new working environment, because you just mentioned it. There's a lot of technology, digitalization, the world has changed, and all this pandemic accelerated things in a very dramatic way. So what is your views from the other side? What do we need?
Sorry. Sorry, 1 second. sorry. So this is exactly what I'm talking about. Basically, so yeah, I mean, obviously a lot of corporations have like IT departments, and usually those are kind of oriented towards like fixing technology issues when they arise. Like IT kind of tends to be like in the background and nobody really knows what they're doing until their computer shuts down. I think that definitely companies need to start taking a more proactive approach of, you know, and whether it's IT department or specific employees that are also making sure that they're teaching employees how to use new technologies, how to keep things secure. That's a big thing because that is a constantly changing field. Digital security, and making sure that being proactive in making sure people know how to use these technologies.
Thank you, Gabriela. Catalina, same questions. And do you believe the employees of the future that are now the present should have different capabilities, abilities to deal with remote work? Any particular comment on this space?
Okay, yes. Well, currently, I don't think it's necessary to hire new employees for this new model of work, either remote or hybrid. I mean, it is true that to work from home probably requires a different set of capabilities or abilities than those you need or display to get done your tasks from the office. But I think the current employees already have those abilities. I mean, some of them more developed, some of them less, but it is just a question of bringing them to the surface and help them to put them in practice. And there are some employees who have some more issues to accommodate to this new reality, I think we have to coach them and not just to say, let's hire someone else, you know? Now, probably what is going to be different from now on is the recruiting process. Probably there are some other soft competencies that will have to be assessed and considered. But for the current workforce, I think we have to strengthen the current abilities and capabilities and coach those who are more reticent to change. It is clear that remote work requires adjustments for all of us who always have worked in the office and are used to have social interactions, and changing this in-person face-to-face interaction have challenges that require a different set of skills than those we normally use in order to remain productive and connected and be successful in today's new normal. And it is important to recognize what it takes to be able to balance the workload with all the changes we are facing. And probably characteristics as empathy and collaborative problem solving, adaptability and time management, and digital abilities, of course, are going to be more relevant now than ever.
Thank you, Catalina. Javiera, anything you would like to add on this space?
Thank you, Tatiana. Yes, I think that it will be very important, the communication between the employer and the employees, because this remote work can make that people feels isolated. So it's very important to keep in touch with the team, to really have a teamwork, even if we are working remotely. So I think that communication it's a key element.
Thank you, Javiera. And lastly, Leticia, any further comment regarding this matter?
Yeah, I think the real challenge is really creating an equitable workspace. This is something that was touched on earlier by Gabriela. And even though our jurisdictions have different regulations, as companies operate more globally, it's important to have a certain level of consistency. So navigating that and finding that right balance is key at this time.
Thank you, Leticia. And now going to a related but slightly different topic, this concept of hybrid work that is gaining traction. Leticia, what trends are you seeing in this space among your clients and in the region?
Well, there is no doubt that the COVID-19 pandemic accelerated the use of remote work around the globe, including in Latin America. And as we see vaccination progressing here in our region, we also see the companies starting to reopen again. And so we are seeing a significant growth of the hybrid model right now. And while this model allows employees to continue working remotely, it also promotes in-person interactions at the company's premises. There is no question that those who could work remotely during the pandemic, not everyone could, but those who could, they were able to do so even more efficiently than we would have thought before 2020. But the time apart also showed employers the importance of some in-person activities that used to be taken for granted in the past. This has proven a key aspect, not only to promote engagement and company culture, but also to build social capital among the workforce. And in this context, I would say that the majority of our clients right now are considering a work model where employees are allowed to work from home or remotely between 2 to 3 days a week. And while the hybrid system has several advantages for both employees and employers, it does decrease the level of direct supervision from the company. So it creates issues like protecting confidentiality of information, time control, and related matters, including health and safety that you mentioned in your introduction and that we will discuss in a bit. So what we are also seeing is that many companies are revisiting their policies and codes of conduct to make sure that they are aligned with the new reality that we will all live from now on. And it's certainly worth investing time and effort to review the local employment practices in the region and make sure that no liabilities are being built or aggravated with this new model of work after the pandemic.
Thank you, Leticia. And Javiera, what would you say are the biggest challenges to implementing a hybrid work plan?
I think that the most important challenge is how to document it, because in most of our countries, we have a formalistic labor law, and it's important to execute a written agreement with employees to make sure that, for example, this reimbursement of costs related to internet and electricity are documented as a working tool, because as Leticia was mentioning, we could try to avoid that it's part of the employee salary for severance purposes. So it's important to document that these working tools are going to be provided by the employer while the employee is working from home, and that it's on a voluntary basis if the employee will go back to the workplace according to the specific needs of the company, as well as when we comply with the sanitary protocols. So at least what I can tell you is that in Mexico, this amendment to the labor law regarding the payment of electricity and internet costs was published due to the pandemic, because before we had nothing related to this matter, and now employers have to comply with this measure, and they have to document it properly to avoid any consequences later on whenever this pandemic is over.
Thank you, Javiera. And this brings me to a comment that Gabriela was making before, and it's that we don't even know what we are at these days. You know, there's a lot of complexity because we have remote work as a temporary measure. We have these alternative or hybrid work models where you go to the office a couple of days, staying home others days. We have flexible work. So there's a lot of interactions and things that seem to be alike, but are not exactly alike. So definitely it is a good advice to take precautions and have the proper policies and be sure that we are in compliance with what the rules of each one of our countries in the region mandate. And here I would like to ask Gabriela, how do you keep diversity and inclusion top of mind when offering this kind of hybrid work? How do you know who is entitled to have this it's a benefit or it's a or to make it mandatory?
Great. So I actually think that when it comes to hybrid work, well, when it comes to diversity, hybrid work offers a really great opportunity. And it's actually, I think, one of the few good things that have come out of this experience. The most obvious example is that the hybrid model allows for flexibility for people who may be caretakers, whether it's for children or for elderly parents. And, just statistically speaking, that tends to be women. And so, before there was maybe even if companies were offering this, it was not something that people would take advantage of, or maybe like men wouldn't take advantage of it or whatever, because they saw that it might stigmatize them or, leave them out of the running for certain promotions. As the hybrid schedule becomes more commonplace amongst all employees, then people who can really take advantage of the hybrid model so their workplace can really fit into their lifestyles are going to feel more comfortable doing so. And I think that's great for diversity and inclusion. It's also a great opportunity for hiring people with disabilities or people who are neuroatypical, who for various reasons might not be comfortable on a day-to-day basis in the standard office setting. And it allows companies now to maybe reach out to employees that would otherwise be reluctant to work for their companies because they know that they have the flexibility to work for them, but they're not going to necessarily be passed over for promotions and whatnot. The challenge, of course, will be that as we do start going back to the office, management needs to be very conscious of the differences in treatment to those employees who choose to use a hybrid model and those who choose a traditional model. I've worked in where, I've had experience in different workplaces, and I can say that, those dynamics are still very present. And it's not enough to offer a hybrid schedule if a manager is still going to give preference to, let's say, an associate who's willing to stay after for a happy hour, while there's another employee who's a mother of two and is at home. It's really an opportunity for workplaces to reevaluate the non-work products that they value and reassess whether those values are a hindrance to diversity.
Thank you, Gabriela. And now, Catalina, back to you. How do you ensure fairness? How to ensure that remote employees will have access to the same opportunities as on-site employees?
Well, okay. In Colombia, social distancing is still in place. So from last year, all of our dealerships have worked under the hybrid model, as not all of the sales force could be in the same dealer at the same time. So they alternate during the week to work from there and from home. In contrast, all the workforce from the headquarters have been working from home since March last year. And we are planning to return next month, also alternating, as we cannot be all in the same space at the same time. So in relation with the sales force, they have been trained in new sales methods, as I told you before, specifically aligned with online sales and attention to the customers across different digital channels, because an increasing number of consumers are doing research online before taking the decision to buy a car. So because in Colombia, buying a car is the second most important investment for a family after the first real estate. So we have also taken more transversal measures to improve communication channels, not just with the clients, but also for the employees and the internal teams. And for this, we are using business collaboration platforms as Teams and Zoom, which have been determinant to successfully get all the advantages from remote and hybrid work. These tools have allowed keeping lines of communication and delegation roles and responsibilities. And in addition, I think we should use these tools not just to work, not just to work from home or from the office, but also to create ways to keep informal communication as well. because probably the importance of day-to-day simple conversations among employees is often overlooked in remote workflows. So, and we should use these tools to try to replicate as far as is possible and a little bit the type of communication that occurs naturally in person, particularly with teams like mine, who are used to work together, always in the same place at the office. We cannot overlook that after all, informal communication boosts creativity, innovative thinking, and improve the connection among the teams. And we also have centralized access to information through digitalization and with paperless policies, which facilitates access to data and surely improves time of response for the internal requirements. And finally, this also facilitates to measure performance, which is not easy in a remote environment.
Thank you, Catalina. I was trying to look over, we have a lot of questions, so I was trying to go through them. And maybe it is worth it to pause here before moving to the next topic. And I would like to ask, there's a question for Leticia regarding vaccination, and maybe this is the right moment to address it. And it's basically vaccination rules. If according to Brazilian law, if it allowed to ask for vaccination to return to work, and any other important point to be reinforced in regards to vaccination. And
Great. This is a great question. Thank you, Tatiana. And well, we had in Brazil a discussion before the Supreme Court about this matter. And the Supreme Court understood that vaccination should be considered as mandatory, meaning that everyone should take the vaccine whenever available based on the age groups, but that vaccination could not be forced on anyone who, for different reasons, did not want to take the vaccine. So it created some questions in the sense that while there is a general instruction that everyone should be vaccinated, it's clearly that no one should or can be forced to be vaccinated. We have to consider that with the idea that the employer in Brazil, just like in most Latin American countries, is responsible for providing a safe work environment. So responding objectively to this question, and now that the vaccination has been advancing in Brazil in younger age groups, what we are seeing is employers asking employees if they have taken the vaccine, of course, as long as their age group has already been called, and some employers using that as a requirement to come to the office to provide services in person. And then for those individuals who either have not been vaccinated because their age has not been called or because for any reason they don't want to take the vaccine, they are at this time being offered a different working arrangement, including remote work. We already had some court discussions on the matter, and recently a very important court precedent where a termination for cause was upheld because an employee from a medical company refused to take the vaccine. And so this person was terminated for cause for putting others in danger of contamination of COVID-19, especially now with the Delta variant, was terminated for cause, filed a claim to discuss about it, and the court upheld the termination for cause. This is the first precedent we have. So certainly we're gonna see a lot of discussions in this sense, and this should be a hot topic, especially for the beginning of next year, when everyone should have already been able to take their 2 shots of the vaccine.
thank you, Leticia. And there's another interesting question from the audience, and I would like Javiera to answer these. how to balance these allowance with other savings as the savings that employees will have, such as transportations and fuel. Any comment
Thank
on
you,
that?
Tatiana. This is also a very interesting question because most employers have executed an agreement with their employees to agree that since they are not going to work to the office, they will not receive the transportation allowance during a certain period of time, and instead they are going to receive the payment or the reimbursement of these working tools that are the internet and the electricity cost. So it is possible to agree in writing with the employees that these working tools or reimbursements are going to be given in exchange of, for example, a transportation allowance or gasoline allowance. So it is possible to do that. The important thing is to properly document it, to have the employees' agreement in writing to avoid any conflict in case of litigation. And also regarding the amount that has to be reimbursed to the employees, there is nothing specifically stated in the laws, but some companies have done an average of the cost of internet, for example, and they are paying such amount to the employee. I can tell you that, for example, for the internet cost, it is approximately $25 per month, and it covers the cost of the internet. So it's really not a very expensive tool, but it has to be paid by the employer. And as mentioned, it's just important to properly document that it's going to be granted only when the employee is working from home.
Thank you, Javiera. And well, as we were stating at the beginning of this conversation today, we were referring, well-being has always been an obligation for the employer party. They have to take care of their people. But I would say with all these pandemic and circumstances of working from home, the issue of mental well-being has like a different spot. We might be more aware of its importance now. And on this space, I would like to ask Javiera, are there any regulations on this regard?
Yes, we can see definitely that it has become more relevant every day, the mental health. And we can now see with this pandemic that work can have a huge impact on mental health. So it's very interesting to see how in much jurisdictions of Latin America, this is relevant. For example, in Colombia, Chile, Peru, Venezuela, and Mexico, it is mandatory for employers to identify and prevent work-related psychosocial risks. So this is very relevant because employers in these countries have the obligation to identify if employees are being exposed to severe stress, to anxiety, and it is increased because employees are working from home. So this is very important in most of these jurisdictions, except in Brazil, because there is really not a specific law addressing mental health per se. However, in the other countries, it is mandatory. And it was surprising for me to see, for example, that in Colombia, this law was enacted in 1984. So it has a long time, while, for example, in Mexico, it was just enacted in 2019. So in Mexico, this is a very new law, but most employers are already complying with this because if they do not, they can have very important penalties. And just to tell you an example, with this policy in Mexico, employers have to submit employees to some surveys for them to answer specific questions regarding the severe stress that they could be exposed, as well as to psychosocial work-related factors. So we can see that this is a trend in all of our countries, and it's very important to comply with these policies.
Thank you, Javiera. Yes, you better watch it. It can become a nightmare. So we have a lot of precedents and rulings from the Supreme Court that would definitely help the interpretation of the Mexican new regulation. Leticia, have there been any employee claims disputes related to this topic? Are there any trends in this regard?
This is a very interesting aspect, Tatiana. And although there has not been a widely common increase across Latin America, we are actually seeing two jurisdictions, Brazil and Colombia, with an increase in the number of cases relating to mental health arising from the pandemic. In Colombia, most claims are related to stress arising from work or burnout diagnosis. And in these cases, employees are often discussing aspects like protection against dismissal, paid leaves of absence, additional compensation for work-related injuries or illnesses. And Colombia is seeing these types of claims increasing rapidly and expect the number of cases with employee mental health issues should continue to increase post-pandemic, considering the challenging circumstances we have been discussing today. And the situation in Brazil is actually somewhat similar to Colombia. There has been a significant increase. It has been estimated by local authorities of over 20% of burnout diagnosis compared to the pre-pandemic world. The lack of boundaries between professional and personal life pushed a part of the workforce to extreme conditions and extenuating working hours. And all of this aggravated by the economic downturn and the rising unemployment rates we are seeing in many Latin American countries are triggering a lot of issues. So in response to that, there has been an increase in programs that are watching for the employees' well-being, as you said, with the creation of additional channels of communication to raise relevant issues to the employers. And finally, while other jurisdictions in our region may not have experienced a similar increase in employee claims related to mental health yet, it is certainly advisable to keep this in the radar and adopt potential mitigation actions. And again, the economic downturn in the region will likely increase the number of overall terminations in the short term. And our experience shows that labor claims tend to increase along with employee terminations.
Thank you, Leticia. And here I would like to know a little bit about what is happening within the different organizations. And I would like to ask Catalina if you have implemented any policies to prevent burnout cases from happening, or do you have any experiences on this field you would like to share, like best practices?
Well, Tatiana, we have taken measures and we are still implementing more formal policies to maintain a positive culture and work environment, as well from remote work, as now that we are returning to the offices and we have a hybrid model. So it has been very important to be understanding of each one's circumstances and the challenges they are going through working from home. Being very aware of these have encouraged the teams to do flexible work arrangements that permit them to fulfill their tasks, knowing that they are sharing the same space with the rest of the family, which probably in some cases is not easy. Also, we have been very insistent through the team leaders in promotes a healthy work-life balance, recognizing that working from home does not mean to work or being available 24/7. We still have working hours and must have free time the same way as when we were at the office. We also provide support to those employees who have felt overwhelmed or burnout for all these situations, and or for the loss of a loved one or someone from the team, or for have been sick, or for any of the situations that many people have went through during the pandemic and the lockdown. And finally, probably now becomes more important the recognition of the individual and team achievements, because this motivates the people, and in this way They know that even if we are not physically present, we are very aware of the goals obtained by them.
Thank you, Catalina. Gabriela, and what about Striker that is part of a very conscious industry in terms of well-being? Has Striker implemented policies to protect the well-being of its employees and prevent burnout? Would you mind sharing some experiences, lessons learned, and pitfalls or best practices?
Certainly. So yeah, you bring up a good point. It would be kind of ironic if a healthcare company was driving its employees into the ground. So I mean, one thing that I've noticed personally, like there's been a big push for things like making sure people use their vacation, take time off. Just because you can't travel, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't take time to rest. In addition, in Latam, a lot of the regional managers have been discouraging things like meetings on Friday afternoons, kind of saying like, if you kind of want to, log off or just kind of like take the afternoon to just kind of like wrap things up and not be going like full throttle, you have the flexibility to do so. Or things like taking time off during the day for, and it's a cliche to say like self-care, but I personally was encouraged by my own manager, like, hey, if you need to go to the gym at 10 a.m. and you want to put that block on your calendar to make that happen, and that's going to help you with your mental health, we'll make that work. Just block that off in your calendar and also take time to take care of yourself. Especially since like the hours kind of are a little bit more nebulous now, there should be more space to be flexible in terms of what times people are working. And I found that Stryker did a really good job with that. Another thing also is just like encouraging a more casual atmosphere at work. I think people are stressed enough, and they shouldn't have to also have anxiety about the fact that their kid might be crying in the room next door, or their cat might jump in the Zoom call, or in my case, their phone might go off in the middle of a presentation. I think that there's a lot of formalities that existed before in the workplace in terms of appearance, in terms of decorum, in terms of style that really don't really make sense at this time. And I think, companies should kind of take a more casual approach, especially for internal communications and meetings. And then I think finally, in terms of best practices, I think this is a space where the personal touch really goes a long way, because a company can do all the policies they want, but if individual managers are not encouraging and implementing these policies with their own smaller teams, nothing's going to happen. And, I think that this is a space where, individual managers really need to be encouraged to like touch base with their teams, people individually, and not just saying like, oh, are you okay? Everything okay? But adding the personal touch. Hey, I know you're taking care of your mother. How is she doing? How are you feeling about that? Or like, how are you dealing with the homeschool situation? Those are the kind of things coming from managers that make a huge difference for employees. And it doesn't really take a lot of time or effort or money to do so, but really fostering a culture where your employer actually shows that they care about you on a human level, and that they're listening to you, and that they're open to feedback. That makes a huge difference. And that could be the difference between someone deciding to stay and someone deciding to go in the future.
Thank you, Gabriela. Definitely, we all need to be valued. I think that's to feel you are appreciated will be my remark on that comment that you just made. And I have a question from our audience, and it goes like this. Law firms have been fundamental to help companies navigate the crisis. What law firms and specialty partners can do to protect the mental health of their employees and avoid burnout during COVID pandemic in Latin America? So I don't know who would like to take it. It has to do with our a specific industry. Javiera, Leticia.
I can start making a few comments and then we'll pass on to Javiera. I would say mainly two things. Well, first, common sense. So we need to understand that everyone was working from home, and as Gabriela said, with kids and other commitments. And so not asking for things with unreasonable and unjustified deadlines, not sending texts very late at night, trying to be respectful of the circumstances that we're all living in is one thing. So that would be common sense. And the second one, it's also something that Gabriela mentioned, which is getting closer to the people you work with. The experience for sure was different for all of us, but in a way we were all in this together. And for instance, in my group in Brazil, we have weekly meetings where we have the opportunity to look at each other and talk to each other and see how everyone's doing. And then if you feel that someone might not having the best day, you will contact them afterwards. It just takes a few minutes. But if you, as you said, Tatiana, people need to feel appreciated and taken care of. And I would say that in law firms too, even though often we are seen as very strict and formal, but still as human beings, we need to be taken care of. So those would be my 2 cents.
Thank you, Letty. Any additional comment, Javiera?
Yes, I totally agree. I think that what we have been doing is to take advantage of the technology. We have, I mean, we all know that we are tired of Zoom meetings, but it's very important also to have Zoom meetings or any other type of meeting online to keep in touch with our team and talk about how we are doing. Not to talk only about work, but also how we are doing, keep connected and keep in touch. And it's very important for supervisors to really ask their team how they are doing, because I think that it's important for all employees to know that they are important for the team and that we are all connected regardless this pandemic that has unprecedented situations. So I think that to keep in touch with the team is essential. And I think that at Baker, we have been doing that successfully with these periodical meetings that we have had online.
Thank you, Javiera. So we're definitely facing a new world with a lot of challenges, opportunities, disruption. And also we as employers are very much more aware of the needs of our employees and our obligations as employers to be aware of their safety and to include them and to maintain them focused and engaged while all these disruption is taking place. And so with these, I would like to go to some of the questions that we have received. Let me see what we would like to address. There's something from Brazil. It says, in Brazil, we have hard and complex labor laws. It was signed a provisional measure by our president during the pandemic for remote work, but as all provisional measure, it expired. Is it legal to ask for the employees to sign addendum contract to go on working from home? It's quite common employees dismissed to claim for any, it is quite common employees, I believe it's get dismissed to claim for anything.
I see this question from Jose Macedo here, and I couldn't agree more that we have hard and complex labor laws, and all of this was made even more complex by the pandemic. During the pandemic, it was an exceptional situation where overnight everyone was sent to work remotely, mainly from home. And so in that context, during this circumstance, no formal addendum was actually required. But more than, I see your question, is it legal to ask employees to sign addendum to contracts to continue working from home? Once the pandemic is over, more than if it's legal to ask, it's a requirement. We had an employment reform in 2017, and it was in the employment reform that an article on remote working was inserted in the Brazilian Labor Code. And this article expressly requires mutual consent. So both parties, including the employee, they have to consent for the employee to work from home. So once the pandemic is over, the advice would be for those companies that want to have employees working remotely, that they actually formalize that situation. Because not only we don't have anymore, like Jose Macedo said, the executive orders that had been issued on an emergency basis, but also once the pandemic is over, whatever was more flexible because of the circumstances should go back to normal, and having a formal addendum is a requirement.
Thank you, Leticia. And I have another specifically for Mexico, Javiera. And it says, have you heard about some companies in the United States requiring their employees to get vaccinated so they don't lose their job? Do you think that this practice can be adopted by other countries, for example, Mexico?
I think yes, it should really be similar. However, in Mexico, it is important to avoid discrimination issues because it is not possible to force an employee to get vaccinated. If he or she doesn't want to get the vaccine, the employer could not force him to do so. However, the employer can make some survey at the entrance of the building to make sure if the employee has any symptoms. And if the employee has any symptoms, he should go back to home to avoid any infection in the workplace. So I think that most employees in Mexico are agreeing to get vaccinated, but there is no rule or any law that can force employees to do so. So I believe that it should be common sense to try to protect our coworkers, but it should be also similar to the US to be able to ask employees to get vaccinated for their own well-being and the well-being of the coworkers.
Okay, thank you, Javiera. I'm trying to look at the questions to see. Can you also see the chat?
Yes.
So maybe if you can help me, because I have some questions in the chat, others on the question and answers. So in my WhatsApp, it's going to explode. So I don't know, it's people who's hearing the conference or what is happening. So I would like to ask Catalina, any other challenge or comment you could think about, any special advice you will give, you would like to share with the audience today, and any particular situation you have faced on this space that you would like the audience to be aware of?
Well, for us, this was all very new. We didn't have a hybrid model of remote work and work from the office. We all just went to the office and work from them. But from now on, that has to change. I mean, we cannot just continue in the same model. So I think that this is going to be a very good advance, and give some flexibility to the employees. It's going to be taken very well for all of us, probably, as I think Leticia was saying, the tendency is going to be that probably we are going to be in the office 3 days during the week and 2 days from home. And this is something that we are still working on to establish a more formal policy. But definitely we are facing a lot of changes, and one that was very important that all of us have to become more familiar with all the digital tools, and that has been a very good thing for all of us as well. So I think we have capitalized all of these challenges in the best benefit for all of the employees and the companies and the clients, as I told you in the beginning, with the webpage that allow you to buy the car online.
Thank you, Catalina. There's a question for Colombia. According to Colombia, or is it possible to work in two companies in the pandemic time at the same period? Well, I'll answer it. Okay, so
With that.
Yes, it is possible from a technical perspective. In this country, an employee can have two employment agreements at the same time or have different kind of agreements at the same time. The issue here is what kind of agreement these employee has with the employer. Does he has exclusivity? How many hours he is working for each one of the employers? Because at the end, the issue, if you have a part-time, there's no issue for working or having two jobs. But if you have a full-time job, most of the times employers request exclusivity because you don't want your employee to be tired and exhausted. Part of the challenge is that people work and have their normal life and have time to enjoy family, have a life balance. So if you're working 20 hours per day, that will not be possible. So the answer, yes, it is possible. Two, you have to review if it would be allowed and how much or how many hours you will be working. And with that, I would like to come back to Gabriela and ask her if she has any final comment, any final recommendation you would like to share with our audience today.
I just think in general, I mean, one of the common themes that I've seen today is just the need for firms and companies to both take this opportunity to kind of reevaluate the status quo, think, really assess what they were doing before and what needs to change in the future. Taking it as an opportunity to really modernize their workplaces so that, God forbid, should something like this happen again, they'll be able to adapt quickly to the new normal. And also just to, aside from just adapting, just really being flexible, really being able to go with the flow. There's not really a better way of phrasing it. The law in a lot of countries is still changing. We still don't know what's going to happen with vaccines and the variants, and whether courts will uphold vaccine mandates. So we're really living in a very chaotic time, if you will, and it's kind of hard to say, you need to do this and you'll be fine. Companies really need to embrace flexibility with their employees and with their policies, and really prepare for the worst, hope for the best, and just implement flexibility with everybody and go with it.
Thank you, Gabriela. So we still have a lot of questions that we will address separately because we unfortunately have run out of time. This is a topic that could keep us going for hours because it is very important. It covers a lot of things, the requirements from the employers, the requirements for the employees, the changes that had to be, the cultural transformation that companies have to go with and make them a vivid experience for everyone. So wishing all the best for these new working environment, and inviting you to seize the opportunity to see that we as employers have an opportunity to shape the future in a different way is definitely something that we must keep in mind and take advantage of it and just go with the flow, because it's not a matter of pandemic. We were facing transformation. And as I said, at a certain point today, all these has just accelerated the process. So just keep taking advantages of the good things that we had before, when all of us went to the office every day without much flexibility, turning back to a different way of working together, taking opportunities like Gabriela and Catalina said, of people that for whom going every day to the office is not so easy. and improving productivity as we have seen it is possible, and understanding that our employees need to be reskilled to work in this flexibility and new working style. So thank you all today for being with us. It was a pleasure to have our special speakers and guests today. Thanks to Gabriela, thanks to Catalina, thanks to Leticia, thanks to Javiera, and to all the people who joined today and who made this event possible. There's always a lot of organization and a lot of work. So thank you to everyone and for your time and commitment. It was a pleasure.